See you. Happy Thursday, happy Friday Eve. I'm very excited about the weekend, as I'm sure all of you are. And thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to have such a large group, a little over 30 people, to talk about succession planning. And in the words of Taylor Swift, are you ready for it? Any other Swifties? Anyway, okay. Concert was amazing, by the way. So we wanted to go ahead and spotlight a few of our fellow chamber members who have had some different kinds of experiences and plans in place for their succession planning. So we're going to talk today with Ellen Okrent with the Fuller Center, Claudia Roberts with Jeff Industries, and Julie Swindler at Families First of Palm Beach County. I am going to encourage all of you to stop and unmute and ask a question or put it in the chat, and I'll monitor that along the way. But what we're going to do is have each of them sort of tell you where they're at in their succession planning. And then we're going to ask some questions, throughout this so that we can sort of get your questions answered and make sure that all of us have really solid plans in place should we need to, whether it's for retirement purposes or emergency succession, so that we've all got our I's dotted and T's crossed. So Ellen, we are going to start with you. Tell us about your succession planning efforts at Fuller Center.
Well, hi there, everyone.
Hi.
I have been at
45. You know what?
the Fuller Center. Lisa, I
12,
think,
sorry.
is.
Yeah.
Anyway, hi there.
I think you have to mute your phone.
Just hold on. Yeah, Lisa Cobb, you're not muted. We can hear you.
Marlene, you should be able to mute her directly.
Who is it?
Lisa Cobb.
There she's
There
muted.
she goes. Okay, there you
Well,
go.
I'm sorry for that. Anyway, I'm Ellen Okrent, and I'm the CEO, for all of you that don't know me, at the Fuller Center. And I have been here for now well over 11 years. And I really was thinking about retiring around now.
And Ellen, can I ask you, just because we have lots of new people, very briefly, like, what does the Fuller Center do?
Sure. The Fuller Center, when I started, was really early childhood education and childcare for after school. We now are really a full community center where we provide very extensive family support services. We are a collaborative agency. Most and many of you work with us on our campus, providing the support services that our families need, because none of us can do what we do alone. We are embarking on an intergenerational program where we are going to open a childcare center at the Volin Center with the elderly. We have brought in middle school because it's not safe for our kids, even in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, to go home alone while their parents are working. And we have a teen leadership program. So we now really fill the full spectrum or age range of children 6 weeks old to 22. And we provide a full array of family support services to all of their families on our 2 6-acre campuses. And now, hopefully getting into the Volin Center fairly soon. So that's what we do in a nutshell, very quickly. It's on our website if anybody's interested. Anybody who wants to play in our sandbox, as many of you do, please join us, and you're more than welcome. And at the same time, we offer any of our services and support to you all as well. And that's one of the really great things about this organization, is that we have developed a network where we can count on each other and rely on each other and help each other out when needed. And that has been the greatest thing that this group has offered to me. Succession, I thought, you get into your 60s and you say, hey, I'm going to retire. And then 65 comes along and you're definitely going to retire. And then you start to look at, hey, what does that look like? And what's in the best interest of our agency? And what's in the best interest of your mental health? Because I know a lot of people that are retired, and those seem to be the ones that are less healthy and more bored and really complaining. And, when is the right time to retire? So we looked at that here in this agency, and we took a really good hard look at the people that were available and or in the pipeline at our agency and realized there's no one here to step up or to take over my role here at this center. So I started a few years ago. Many of you knew the person that I had identified, and it's not easy. So I brought on another second in command, and her name is also Ellen. And sometimes people tease that it's the Ellen show, but it really isn't. But anyway, so we brought in someone, and she's the deputy director, and she's been here now for over a year. And you don't really realize how much you have in just historical knowledge and the things that you gain doing your job day to day, and how much turning over all that information really takes. And then you meet new people and you bring new talent on and you embrace all of the new ideas that they have that really can enhance some of the things that you're already doing. So some of the plans that you have this whole plan laid out and you think, that looks really great, but then all of a sudden the new players come on board and it doesn't really work out exactly the way you had planned. At the same time in this agency, my CFO is also looking to retire, and we've grown during my time from a $3 or $4 million agency to now looking like an $11-12 million agency, and so much has changed, and so many processes and procedures have changed, and so many requirements have changed that turning over that position also is going to take some time. So what we're doing here in this organization, and when you think about it, it's really not much different than a typical succession plan, other than the fact that we do not and did not have anybody that we could groom and bring up into these positions. So we have had to go outside. We haven't found somebody looking to be a CFO soon. So we're looking for that person, if anybody knows somebody that wants that position. And I am grooming someone who's new because I didn't have someone. In our process, what we're doing is this person is taking on more and more of the day-to-day operations. And I also brought on a new philanthropy director who is taking on most of the fundraising responsibilities, leaving the board responsibilities to me. And that seems to be one of the areas that no one or less people really want to do. And changing your board over and making your board really a good working asset to your organization is a difficult job in and of itself. It's sort of this whole nonprofit monster that we bring on these people and they don't know the work that we do and they don't know how we do it. But as a nonprofit, we're required to have a board. Sometimes grooming the right board members is a challenge. So in our little organization, that is pretty much what we're doing. Many of us on the executive committee discussed, does the executive or the CEO stay after the transition? And, it really is up to the person coming up to get the authority and to have the agency turned over, and for the current CEO and the executive director to leave and move on. And after that discussion this week, I really thought about it, and that is probably how it will turn out here, but there was no one that was being groomed here. So my process was a little bit longer because I had to bring on a successor. There was no successor here to groom. And I just want to share one other piece is when I was brought on, and there is a member of this group, Pam, who used to work with me many years ago in the very beginning. When they brought me on, they kept the old executive director here for 6 months. Not a good plan, but there wasn't a succession plan. It was just they brought me on and they left her on, and it really caused a lot of confusion. So with that experience, and hopefully with the process that we're working right now, which is a little bit out of the box, we will have a smooth transition. However, life changes and best laid plans don't often work out as well as you had hoped. And I guess this is probably a good time for me to turn over to Claudia, because maybe we kind of just, fit into, how I'm doing it and how your plan you think is going to work so great. And then here we are. So if Michelle doesn't mind, is it okay if we?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to shift it over to Claudia, but I do have one quick question, two quick questions, sorry. Number one, did you use the search firm to hire?
Yes.
You did. Okay. And then number two, just by comparison, I'm going to ask Claudia to do the same thing. I know you said your annual budget's about that $11-12 million range. What is your staff size?
My staff size is about 130 in the summer and 120-ish during the school year.
Okay, perfect. So Claudia, as you give your brief overview of Jeff Industries, I'd like to know the same thing, just so we all can sort of compare, how we're handling it based on agency size.
Okay, I'm Claudia Roberts. I'm the Executive Director for Jeff Industries. We are a mental health agency. We located in Hypoluxo, and we offer social, leisure, recreational activities, networking, food distribution, job training, skills, competitive job placements, assistance, case management, housing as well, with a transitional housing and permanent and supportive housing. We have also a substance abuse program for persons that are in recovery from a medicated assisted treatment from MAT, and it's to help them also find jobs in the community. Now, in terms of our agency, our budget is 1.7 million, and we have 13 staff on board. So, we have like 7 part-time and the rest are full-time employees. Now, in terms of my story, I have been with Jeff Industries already for 33 years. I came in to work, with the previous executive director, Angelo Esquatrito. And when the time came for him to retire, he actually talked me into becoming the next executive director. So I became his succession plan. I wasn't sure at the time if that's what I wanted to do, but I stayed, and long and behold, now 15 years later, since I became the executive director, came the time for me to think about retirement. My goal was always to retire after 35 years of employment. So what we set up a plan to have a succession, somebody from the inside, from the agency, to move and step up to be the next executive director. We chose the clinical director. He'd been here 10 years. We started doing, a lot of training activities, that to groom him for the position. And he left, like about a couple of months ago. I don't know if maybe he realized that that was something that he didn't want to do, getting to the administrative part of the agency. But at the same time, when we were doing this plan, I made sure that we're going to have somebody to replace him when he would be the executive director. And then I would have somebody in-house here to be able to replace the person that was going to kind of take the role of the clinical director. So he left, and we were able to implement, the part of the plan that who was going to take over the leading of the, the programs, like be the program director, and who was going to take the position, a position that we had that was consumer services facilitator. So we did that, we put that all in place. We had to hire one extra person to fill in, the void. Now, I talked to the board after this person left, and we're in a situation now that they're going to have to hire an executive director, because we don't have anyone aboard now that could, move into that position. The one thing that I wanted to share with all of you is that when I became the executive director, the board of directors provided a contractual agreement to the previous executive director, to help me, mentor me, help me grow in the job. That actually became difficult, like Ellen was saying about it, that having another person, coming in, because the staff, everybody was confused. They would come in and he would come in and he would talk to staff and ask them questions. And then they would come to me and ask him, like, who do we have to reply? Do we have to do what he's telling us? Aren't you the executive director? So from my personal experience, I truly believe that when I finish as an executive director, I'm going to let the person that is moving in, to be in charge, take charge of the, of the agency, that I can be available, if they need, like that person needs some consulting or help, to better understand the agency. But I don't think it's a good idea to have somebody that was the executive director stay with, with working with, having coming into the agency, because that also, it created a lot of issues for me and the staff. And I think that whoever comes in has to, take charge and, and have different way of maybe looking at the services, the program, things that need to be done maybe differently. And that's, pretty much in a nutshell, my story. Also, like Ellen was talking, our fiscal manager is also retiring, kind of like parallel with me. In part of the succession plan, we set up to hire an accountant person to come in and work that is still working with the fiscal manager. My fiscal manager lives in Chicago, so they work everything. She works remotely, and we are grooming this person that is taking the job to, when Jackie retires, to take full charge of the position. And I'm hoping that, we've been doing this. She's been here like the other girl, like over a year. And it's nonprofit accounting is not that easy. So, we're hoping that everything is going to work out as well.
Thank you, Claudia. We're going to toss it over to Julie Swindler, and then I have all kinds of questions for everybody. Julie, you want to start? And if you could also give us your annual budget and the size of the number of staff you have.
And maybe, Michelle, before we go, I know there's a question that just came up for Claudia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was me. Thanks, Ruth. I appreciate it. Just wondering when it wasn't clear to me when you said you named the interim successor, the person who would be, moving into that role. Did your board take a role in that naming or identification, or were they more hands off in recognizing that really that's their responsibility to appoint the CEO?
When we set up the transition plan, I worked it out with the board. They had a committee, and they actually met the person that, I had in mind that was going to take the position. And that included also that he had to attend board meetings, so that they could get familiar with him.
Right.
And, so that worked out. And they actually were on board with with him taking the position.
Okay.
But something happened, and he left.
All right, sorry. If you mentioned that, I ended up having to get a call. So I'm sorry if you mentioned that, but I was just wondering how active they were in that process. Thank you.
Great. All right, Julie. Julie, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry. I'll go ahead and go. My name is Julie Swindler. I'm the CEO of Families First of Palm Beach County. My story is a little bit different. I've been with the agency since inception 33 years ago. I started as a case manager, and at that time, the director was telling me he was grooming me to take over his role and function, which I had no desire to do. But he had gotten in trouble with funders and the board at that time. And so the board was going to be letting him go. So I ended up taking the position. to save the agency, quite frankly. And that's how I got into this role so many years ago. So now as I look at retiring, and let me just step back a little bit and just give you a little snapshot of our agency. We have two different departments. We have maternal and child health, which is prevention and early intervention for prenatal to 5. So we do a lot of outreach work as well as intervention and trying to do the brain development, making sure that children remain healthy. And then we have behavioral health and community support. So we really do the whole gamut from prenatal to age 22, the prenatal to 22 work. We primarily take the most at-risk kids and students and young adults in Palm Beach County in 7 of our different programs. Our size budget is $6.8 million, which will be in October. And we have 80 staff come October as well. So I kind of got this agency as by default as a CEO. So I had a lot of, in fact, I wish I had the nonprofit chamber 31 years ago when I took over, because I was a practice person, knew nothing about budgets or anything else. And I made so many mistakes before, and I'm surprised the board kept me around because I was making mistakes all over the place until I finally learned what I was supposed to do to run an agency. So fast forward 33 years later, prior to probably a year ago, my second in command, some of you know Roxana Childs, and I were working on her retirement and really talking about my retirement as well, which I was going to be behind her a few years, and trying to figure out how we were going to set the agency up, you know, because 2 key people were looking at that time of retirement. And then unfortunately, during that topic, Roxanne ended up getting cancer, ovarian cancer, and she passed away a year ago. So that kind of precipitated my thought processes. You know, it's really difficult to think that you're working all your life, you know, and getting ready for retirement, and then you can't even enjoy retirement. So I started thinking a little bit more about, you know, what is that timeline going to look like for me? So I kind of figured the last piece of work that I want to do is really look at long-term sustainability of the organization, legacy gifts to major gifts, and making sure we can be around for the next 100 years. So that will take me about 2 to 5 years. So I figured that's my timeline that I want to give in terms of working towards retirement. So we in the agency did 3 different things. Most recently, we brought to the board a procedure for succession planning to adopt. And I can share this information if anybody wants it, but I looked at some of the key roles within the organization: the CEO, our CPO role, our maternal and infant mental health director, our clinical directors, our program directors, to ensure that that we had some kind of sustainability plan for each of these key positions, and the CFO. Then we looked at the procedure for ensuring that we have cross-training in every department. So like in our finance department, we have our director of finance, but he's cross-training his 2 other people under him so that if he's out sick or whatever, you know, things can continue. And our program directors were identifying people that can be program supervisors and move up to program directors. In fact, our recent administrative staff we've hired from within or promoted from within. So the cross-training is really working in developing our leaders within the organization. We also looked at if we identify an individual within the agency that would like to be groomed for one of these key positions, what do we need as part of their development plan to help them get the skills and training that they need to be able to move up? So we developed that as one of our procedures, is to look at what are the core competencies that they would need to be able to be ready for a position when the time arose. And so we've started doing that. And then part of what we're going to start doing is tracking the progress and the indicators for each of the people that we've identified as being able to come into one of those positions, so that we can ensure we're on track for that if that were to happen. Additionally, the board updated their procedure for selecting a CEO. And I always believe, you know, one of my board members one time told me that, you know, they wanted me to look outside the agency and within the agency identify somebody to be the CEO. And I said, well, that's kind of your job, not mine. But part of what, you know, we worked on is a procedure for selecting a CEO. So if anything happens suddenly, that they have that procedure in place and how they're going to transition and get a search committee and what that's going to look like and who from the board is involved in that search committee. So that's all laid out as well in terms of the position for my role. In addition, what we've done is two things as well. We have a succession plan for interim, and in fact that worked recently because I had to go out on medical leave. And it worked like a charm. So it's who's going to take over my place while I'm gone, who's going to speak to the staff if I'm unavailable to be able to do that, so the staff doesn't get worried when the CEO's gone all of a sudden. How are things going to be maintained so that all your everything within the organization that needs to happen, whether it's funder driven, reports that need to get done or monitorings of whatever's happening, who's going to really do all that work. So everything is laid out in the interim. And then we also laid out if it's longer term, and a search has to be conducted, who is going to be interim while the search is happening to determine who is going to be the next CEO. The other thing we did is in this plan, we outlined everything that somebody needs to know. We're a bank, our bank number of situations, different codes that we need to know, different building, who's in charge of what, who's our lead rep for the banks. We've outlined that all with the phone numbers, with the information that people need to know. So if something happens suddenly, we have that information in one place. And it goes to key people. It goes to the interim, who's going to be the interim. If I'm gone, it goes to the board chair and the HR chair, so that, and the legal representation of the organization. So we have all this information at our disposal so that somebody's not really struggling to try and find the key operations that we need for the organization. So that's all spelled out. The other thing that's spelled out is when somebody's taken over the CEO, how the board oversight for that particular person happens, and also the communication plan that needs to be implemented in notifying funders or the staff and everything else that needs to be notified when you have an acting director in place and the CEO is gone. So that's in a nutshell. I think part of what I hope for is to get somebody here at the agency, and I've got a couple people that I would love to see groomed for my position. And I've talked to one in particular if she was of interest, so that I can start bringing her and grooming her and introducing her to the board and things like that. I want somebody here who can commit to a longer time. I've been consistent here now 33 years. And I think it means something when you have somebody that's, you have some kind of longevity within the organization. You want somebody who can. So some of my people here are like my age or a little younger, because some of us have been here for a while. So we're really looking at somebody who has a work, that wants to work for the next 10 to 15 years or so. And also the consistency, because we've created a culture here that people really love the culture. And in fact, when people leave, they're coming back. We just recently rehired people, like 3 or 4, that has now come back to the organization. So culture is very big to us here. And sometimes when you hire somebody from without, they bring a lot of people in and they start making turnover and things like that. So part of what we're really looking at is how can we maintain a culture. We've got great staff and great leaders, and how can we develop from within so that we can maintain that culture going forward.
Thank you for that, Julie. So I have some follow-up questions, and before I get to those, I also just wanted to briefly sort of give one added perspective. So within this agency here at Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, like I'm thankfully not near retirement yet, but I have, one of my lead staff, our chief program officer, may not be wanting to retire anytime soon, but I realize that there is so much oversight that she is responsible for that if she decided to leave or retire or what have you, we don't really have a plan for how that is going to work. So we are currently doing a full, sort of a restructure and elevating some other director level to a senior director level just to give added support to the chief program officer position, but also from the perspective of succession planning that's not the CEO position. We have so many eggs in one basket in her, and she's excellent at what she does, and I never want her to leave. But if she did, she's a walking computer with all kinds of information. And so it's really taking a look at the whole organization. And while the CEO position and that succession planning is absolutely crucial, what other positions within our agencies are just as important? If they were to have some sort of emergency leave or, unexpected leave permanently or what have you, do we have the right pieces in place? Because essentially it's going to fall on all of us. If that, next level person, second or third in command, if they can no longer do their jobs, then it becomes our responsibility. And are we equipped as CEOs enough to be able to pick up those pieces? So Julie, what you just mentioned about having a manual of sorts with all of the information that you would need is really important. And knowing how Matt Latica probably thinks, he's like, where is that document and is it well protected against cyber? Right, Matt? I know. See, I'm learning. Is that information well protected against cyber whatever? But it's absolutely crucial that that information is in the hands of more than just us. So I wanted to sort of ask the three of you today, in relation to your board, how engaged is your board in the selection of someone new? Whether that's an internal decision of someone you're moving from within or from the outside, because at the end of the day, if something happens to one of us, it technically does fall on our board of directors. So, how confident are we that our board chairs can pick up where we leave off? But how engaged are they in the decision making?
Well, in my case, the board of directors has always been very engaged since we started talking about this succession planning, retirement. They actually talked about, that they would, place an ad and that they were going to do the interviewing, that they wanted me to be part of the interviewing process to provide feedback, but they want to make sure that everything is going to continue and it's going to, continue well. But they're very engaged.
My board was very, very engaged in hiring our new deputy director. She's not new, she's been here a year and a half. Also in my development director, and they are, of course, very engaged with my CFO at this point in time because of the finance committee and our foundation and audit committee. But so my board is very engaged, but they were engaged at bringing on this person at this level. I would hope that they will do a search at the right time. And of course, Ellen, the deputy director, would throw in her hat and of course have the highest opportunity because she would have the most knowledge. So it's not a given that she's going to get this position. The board really should be doing a search to see, who's out there and what opportunities there are for the agency, when that time comes. But my board is participating in this.
Now my board has always left it to me to do the hiring of a staff or key people, you know, and you know, whoever we're hiring. But I have brought my board in for finance because it was important for me to have a particular skill when we were hiring for that a few years ago. So I brought my chair of the finance committee in to help me with that. And most recently, I have two boards, a foundation board and our operating board. And I brought in a couple key people from each board to help me with my philanthropy director, because we were looking at major gifts and legacy giving. And I really wanted them to be involved in that piece of it, because they would be working very closely together. When it comes to me, they basically have it all outlined of how they're going to search for a new CEO. So they'll be actively involved in that. And the way we kind of operate, I'm sure they're going to bring in maybe a couple key staff as well, because it's important for whoever they choose to be able to fit within the organization and within our mission and those kinds of things. So that'll be up to them, but they do highly respect my recommendations. So if there's somebody internally, the way this board operates, they would be basically wanting to seek my feedback and see what I thought in terms of promotions from within.
Now, I am curious, collective call here. How many of you have succession plans already in place? Show of hands, just a quick. Okay, so based on the number I can see in front of me, not everybody, not a lot. And then my next question is, how often do you review that? You know, is that something you guys, it was written 10 years ago and no one's looked at it since? Or is the board, you know, reviewing that as often as they do your traditional policies? So that's something to consider as well. There are questions on the side about sharing your succession plan. And I think if there's anyone on this call that has a succession plan and is willing to share it with Marlene, that would be really helpful, because we all do have different needs. We're different sized agencies. And so I think that might be helpful if you're willing to share that, to send it to Marlene. I am curious just to get the perspective of Julie and Claudia and Ellen and anyone else who'd like to chime in. But when we're thinking about hiring somebody to replace ourselves, you know, what are the core characteristics we want to see in those people? Because I think we all have such a personal connection, an emotional connection to our mission, to the work, you know, that's why we're in these roles. And so to hand that off to somebody, whether it's quickly and unexpectedly, or it's a long-term plan, you know, what do we see as the core needs of our positions? Do you guys want to chime in on that?
I wanted,
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead, Ellen. Ellen, go ahead.
Yes, Julie.
okay, I can start first. I've been giving this a lot of thought, because when I first started, I'm a practice person. I have a license in clinical social work, and that's what the board wanted. It was a new agency providing case management. They really wanted somebody who was a practice person and a program person to be able to oversee this new agency. But over the years, it's really turning into more fundraising and sustainability, and making sure that we continue to meet our core competencies within the organization, have enough money and resources to be able to do that. So part of what we'll be looking at in the next CEO is somebody who really can fundraise. We're looking at two different things, you know, that we always have a chief program officer that's a strong clinical person with acumen for being able to oversee programs and to really make sure we have sound, good programs. And then on the CEO front, we'll be looking for somebody who has, you know, enough experience in understanding how social services work. Because I think, because I'm a practice person, when somebody comes to me and says, I've got a homeless individual, I'm more apt to find the money for them, you know, because that's my world. So it's not going to be somebody who's all business minded and doesn't have that acumen. So it has to have that gentle or that twofold purpose that really understands social services and the needs of people who are out in the field from a practice level, but then also has a love and joy for fundraising, and be able to really sell our mission to the folks out there that can end up continue to support our programs.
Now, for me, the previous executive director, he passed away. And before he died, he actually made me swear on his deathbed that I was going to make sure that we were going to continue the agency and continue the culture, the way we relate to the clients and what we do, that he didn't want anybody ever to come in and do a total revamp and change how we do services. So I'm looking that for somebody that comes in that can continue the mission, the way we deal with our clients, everything, the funders, and like Julie said, also important, the fundraising piece for the agency. Right now I am the person that I'm the one that does all the grant writing, all the fundraising efforts for the agency, so that I want to make sure that that person can do it too. Now the board keeps telling me that they are looking for some kind of person that has some business a background, so that they can set up a 5-year plan, enhance what we have now and grow the agency. So we're going to see, I don't know how that's going to work out, but but I'm going to make sure that whoever comes in that can, be sensitive to the needs of the persons we serve, and that, clients, I know the money is important, but the clients are as important to us than it is all the, the money and everything that has to come in.
And there's so much that Julie and Claudia have said in different parts of when they were speaking. But I really looked at somebody, or we're really looking at somebody that, first of all, has the passion, the drive, and the energy that, personally, that I had 20 years ago, and most of us had, who are my age, when we were really looking to grow our agencies. And with that comes new knowledge and new technology and understanding of new research and the exposure to a lot of things that, we've been doing this a long time and we just know how to do it. But there's a lot going on in the world around us that some of these other younger people have that I don't. And that's what excited me so much about bringing our person on, because she does bring some new energy and some new information, yet she really has the right passion to maintain the culture that we have here. But I do have to lean towards what Julie said as well. The responsibility of the CEO has really leaned heavily toward a fundraising person. I'm also a practice person. And one of the things that I find most difficult is to ask for money and to go out and do those things. Writing the grants are fun. Writing the grants to me are a challenge, and getting the money after you've written a grant, feels great. But sometimes the events and the going out and the talking to the community and selling ourselves is not my favorite thing that I like to do, but it is key to the sustainability of our agency. And I think that person has to be strong, not only in the operations, but in the sustainability and the fundraising piece. I think that person is more difficult to find, at least in my experience. And I don't know how my plan is going to fall out. Ellen is really leaning more towards operations. And thankfully, we have a little while to actually make the change. But that's a really important thing to think about as to, you know, where's the economy going, and how do we sustain our agencies. And the CEO is the face of the agency.
Mhm.
And I want to be respectful of time, but I have two more questions I'd like to get out. So speaking of that, and the fact that we all wear so many hats, as the three of you are working through your succession plans, and we know that the CEOs are handling the fundraising and operations, and in some cases, you know, grant writing and program planning and whatever else, board development, you know, is this a good time to take a deeper dive in the job descriptions of the CEOs of these organizations and say, you know what, this really should be 3 positions? You know, how are you handling that? What do you think about that?
I think
I
you're right,
have,
Michelle. I think that we don't realize how much we've been doing, and how much the job has grown. And I don't know if, you know, what's really baffling to me is, where are the next generation of people behind all of us? And it's not only in our industry, I think it's worldwide. You know, people are doing different things, and are, you know, even the population size has shrunk. So where are the people that are going to take this on? And many of those who would take this on have a whole different philosophy of life and work balance. And, you know, are the new CEOs going to invest the amount of time and energy that we typically do? And should we be looking at dividing some of these responsibilities into more than one position? That's a really good question.
I agree with Ellen. You know, it's you know, we do so much and spend, you know, and, you know, when I see what I do, when I was telling you, when I was working with this fellow that was going to take the position, I gave him a lot of other added responsibility, you know, get him adjusted to it. But then after he left, I kept thinking about the next person that is going to come in. And I had already kind of like rewrite the planning for the, you know, to present to the board of directors as to the lady that is now the program director for the agency, that she kind of had to take a different role to become the assistant to the executive director, so that she can take on some responsibilities that I don't know if the next person that is going to come in is going to, you know, be willing or wanting to do. You know, it's different people have different ways of looking, you know, what is to be an executive director. So far, you know, we'll see how, you know, how that's going to work out. Because, you know, like I told you, the board here is looking for more a person like a business background person. They want to see growth, but at the same time, they want to maintain what we do, that how we're doing it. And I don't think that person is going to be able to do like what I'm doing now, and that other stuff that, you know, like focus on basically on the big time in the fundraising for the agency.
And I agree with you, Michelle, in terms of the 3 different jobs, because, you know, since I kind of grew up in the age, I just kept on taking more and more on, so that I can make sure that we could continue to pay staff and give, you know, try to get more money for them and the resource within the community. So I know somebody's not going to want to do that coming on. I see a lot of my staff that are very hard workers, but they want that life balance. You know, they want to be able to go home at a decent hour, and they don't want to have to do work on the weekends unless there's an event that we do or whatever. They do want that life balance. So I know internally we've been looking at how can we cut back on certain things. Like a lot of us would show up to meetings, and it's like we don't have to go to everything. So part of what we've been looking at is how can we decide to use our capital within the organization, so that we only have one representative at meetings, that can report back, and it frees up some time for other jobs. So a lot of it has been kind of looking internally with how we can cut back on some of the wasted time, so that we can be smarter and then determine where the gaps and what do we still need going forward in terms of resources for manpower and staffing.
Great comment, Marlene, about different culture of work ethic. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and it worries us all because we've invested so much time and energy and effort into building, and then it's time for some people to walk away and just wanting to leave it in the best possible space for the next person. But that hits hard, I think, to have to make those decisions. And the reality is our boards can be very supportive of us, but they don't understand our day-to-day. They don't understand our daily operations and the intricacies of what we do. So as much as they want to support, they also have full-time jobs. So it's planning for ourselves and our own departures. But thank you all for a great conversation. Again, for those of you who do have succession plans and are willing to share, please send those over to Marlene and she can send them out. There is, hold on one second. Oh, there's one question here. Are there any small nonprofits on the call whose CEO is also the founder of your organization? And do you have plans for succession? Suzanne, Alex, any plans in place?
So I am the founder and CEO of Sweet Dream Makers, which I collaborate with so many of you who are on the call. The board just keeps saying, we have to find another Susie. We have to find another Susie, which is not so easy to find. However, my succession plan is filled with redundancy. I think that's the best way, that if something should happen with me, I've taught the board, every board member can do something to run the organization. And my staff really overlaps a lot. I teach them how to do, the development person understands how to run the program, but I'm very small. So in order to be a good development person, you have to really understand the program, which is true, large or small. So that's how I sleep at night, should something happen where I can't continue. Will I find somebody who will work as hard and be as devoted as I am? I hope that, just like all of you who've been at your organizations for a long time, that person will develop into the love of the organization if they're going to stay. And I think you're going to know that pretty quickly. Within a year or two, if that person, if they don't, I think and then you just have to move on to find the person that does truly fall in love with it. But you can't expect people, and especially young people, somebody said in the chat, to work the way we work, especially as a founder. And all of the CEOs that who've been there for so long, you're like a founder, even though you haven't literally been the founder, but you're that devoted.
Can I say one thing? I'm a founder of a small agency, and I have job coaches that work for me. And I have a gentleman in his 30s, and I've told him, and my other board member knows, that he's being groomed, because I'm not planning on going anywhere, if now or ever, really, because it's just so a part of my life. But he knows that if something happens to me, and my other board members know that he steps in, he's being, taught everything, because it's important to me that my hard work and dream continues on. It's very important, that he knows that.
And I think for all of us, just making sure that there's a succession plan in place, but also an interim succession plan as part of that for emergency-based leave, temporary leave. I think it's just as crucial, and making sure your board knows and is, a part of that planning, but also your senior level staff, for those of you who are fortunate enough to have senior level staff so that you have a solid foundation for if and when you have to leave, whether it's temporary or permanently, so that the agency's not left trying to figure it all out. But we appreciate you all so much. Sorry we went a little bit over, but thank you all for joining us today. It was great to see you again, not meeting in July, but we will meet again in August. We'll have some great content for you. And Community Spirit Awards are coming up later this year, so we'll be getting some information out about that as well. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Happy
Bye, take
summer,
care.
everybody.